Today, we're diving into an absolutely unprecedented moment in a federal courtroom. It's a story that has everything: a defiant defendant, a judge whose legendary patience finally ran out, and a single powerful order that sent shockwaves through the entire legal system. And it all came to a head with these exact words. Just listen to that command from Judge Caldwell to the U.S. Marshals. That one sentence set off a chain reaction, and in that instant, everyone in the room understood just how high the stakes had become. So let's break down what happened. This was supposed to be a totally routine pretrial hearing. The kind of thing that happens every single day. But it very quickly spiraled into this historic confrontation between a defendant who refused to back down and a federal judge who was pushed to his absolute limit. And this is the flashpoint. The defendant doesn't just get upset, he interrupts the judge mid-sentence to say this. Think about how direct that challenge is. It's not just an outburst, it's a complete rejection of the court's legitimacy. People who were there said you could have heard a pin drop. The entire courtroom just went completely still. And Judge Caldwell, he just paused, stayed calm, and gave one final warning. He made it crystal clear what would happen next if the disrespect continued. The tension in that moment was just off the charts. So, did the defendant listen? Nope. Instead, he turns to the people in the gallery and makes this dismissive gesture toward the judge. And that was it. That nonverbal act of contempt. That was the final line. There was no coming back from that. And boom, the response was swift, and it was twofold. As the marshals were physically removing the defendant, Judge Caldwell was already on the record revoking his bail. So this wasn't just about getting him out of the courtroom. It was about the immediate loss of his freedom based on everything that happened before and that one final act. Now, you might be thinking this all just blew up out of nowhere, right? Well, that's what's so important to understand here. It didn't. This explosive moment was actually the climax of a months-long pattern of defiance and escalating tension. Just look at the timeline. The first challenge to the court's authority, that happened 3 months before. Then, 6 weeks prior, Judge Caldwell issued a formal, on-the-record warning. Fast forward to 2 weeks before the hearing, and pretrial services are flagging social media posts for possible witness intimidation. So you see, that final gesture in court didn't cause the judge's reaction, it just triggered a response that had been building for a long, long time. And here's the legal bedrock for the judge's decision. This wasn't just about bad manners in the courtroom. We're talking about multiple missed check-ins, a violated no-contact order, and what prosecutors described as thinly veiled threats online. Every single one of these was documented, creating a paper trail that would become absolutely critical. And this brings us to what might be the most fascinating part of this story. Judge Caldwell's decision wasn't an angry, impulsive reaction. Not at all. It was a strategic, calculated, and perfectly documented move that he had prepared for this exact scenario. How do we know it was prepared? Because of this. Within an hour, just 1 hour of that confrontation, the court filed an 11-page written order laying out every single reason for revoking bail. Let me tell you, nobody writes an 11-page legal document in 60 minutes. It was ready to go. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Former appellate judge Patricia Hammond nails it with this quote. She says that order was obviously ready. The judge was prepared for this moment, and that, she says, is a difference between a judge who just reacts and one who is truly strategic. The legal strategy here has a name. It's called building a record. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You meticulously document every single violation, every warning, every instance of noncompliance. Why? So that when you finally have to make a big move, you have an ironclad justification that is almost impossible to challenge on appeal. And as former federal prosecutor Marcus Webb points out, this is like lawyering 101. You build that record piece by piece before you make your move. That dramatic confrontation in the courtroom, that was just the final piece of the puzzle that the judge needed to act. So why is this one incident getting so much attention? Because what Judge Caldwell did wasn't just about one defendant in one courtroom. He was sending a powerful message, a message that is now creating some serious ripple effects across the entire federal justice system. To really get why this is such a big deal, you have to compare it to the past. In the infamous Chicago 7 trial, the judge actually had a defendant bound and gagged just to keep the trial going. Caldwell's approach is being seen as a whole new template. You just remove the disruption completely and revoke their bail. It preserves the integrity of the court without the same kind of physical confrontation. And the fallout here is pretty significant. First, it's a huge warning shot to anyone thinking of using a courtroom for political theater. Second, defense attorneys everywhere are now scrambling to update their advice to clients on how to behave. And maybe most importantly, it sets a new precedent for combining removal and bail revocation all at once, which completely changes the game for any defendant thinking about being disruptive. So, where does this leave the defendant? Well, he's currently being held without bail, and any appeal he files is facing a giant hurdle. And what's that hurdle? It's that same meticulous record of defiance that Judge Caldwell spent months building. It makes a successful appeal very, very unlikely. And all of this brings us to the core tension of this whole situation. Judge Caldwell's actions were methodical, they were strategic, they were legally sound, but they were also a massive exercise of judicial power. And it leaves us with a really critical question. In the mission to protect the rule of law, how do we make sure we never cross that fine line between preserving a court's integrity and outright judicial overreach?